What if I told you that a single plague wiped out half of Europe's population, and completely reshaped the world as we know it? From the collapse of feudalism to the birth of modern medicine and the Renaissance, the Black Death didn't just change history, it created a new one. But how did such unimaginable devastation lead to progress? Stick with me as we uncover the untold story of how humanity rose from the ashes of one of history's darkest chapters. The Black Death. It began innocently enough. In 1347, trading ships arrived in Europe carrying goods from the east, but something far more sinister traveled with them. Rats scurried off the ships, fleas clung to their fur, and within weeks, towns and cities began to crumble under the weight of an unseen enemy. People called it the Great Pestilence, or the Black Death, and as it swept across continents, it left devastation in its wake. But beneath the surface of this unparalleled tragedy, the seeds of a new world were being sown. Picture Europe in the early 14th century. The population was booming, trade routes flourished, and cities were expanding. But the signs of trouble were already there. Harsh winters and poor harvests had weakened the people, and famine loomed. When the plague arrived, it struck like a thief in the night. At first, no one understood what was happening. People fell ill suddenly, with strange black boils appearing under their arms and at their groins. Fevers and chills consumed them, and most were dead within days. Panic spread faster than the disease itself. Families abandoned the sick, entire villages were deserted, and mass graves filled the countryside. Within 5 years, up to 50 million people, half of Europe's population, were gone. It wasn't just a health crisis. It was the collapse of the known world. But as the dust settled, those who survived found themselves standing in a changed society. Before the Black Death, Europe's economy was built on feudalism. Lords controlled the land, and peasants worked it in exchange for protection. But the plague destroyed that system. The fields, once teeming with workers, now lay empty. Entire estates were left without anyone to tend them, and lords were desperate to keep their farms running. For the first time, peasants had leverage. Those who survived could demand higher wages, better working conditions, and even their freedom. The rigid hierarchy of medieval society began to crumble. Many peasants moved to cities in search of opportunities, fueling urbanization. A new middle class began to emerge, paving the way for a capitalist economy that would define Europe in the centuries to come. The plague's devastation forced cities and governments to take a hard look at sanitation and public health. Though people didn't yet understand germs, they recognized patterns. Quarantines were introduced. Ships arriving in Venice had to remain anchored for 40 days, a quarantine journey. Streets were cleaned, and officials started monitoring burial practices to limit the spread of disease. These early efforts to control outbreaks marked the beginning of organized public health measures. Over time, they would evolve into the medical systems we rely on today. The Black Death also sparked interest in the study of disease, eventually leading to breakthroughs in medicine and science during the Renaissance. Religion was the cornerstone of medieval life, but the Black Death shook people's faith to its core. Many believed the plague was divine punishment for humanity's sins. Processions of flagellants marched through towns, whipping themselves to atone. Others turned to extreme piety, while some lashed out at minority groups, like Jews, accusing them of poisoning wells, a tragic chapter of scapegoating during the plague. Yet, for many, the Church's failure to stop the plague or explain it sowed seeds of doubt. Priests died alongside commoners, and prayers seemed to go unanswered. This growing disillusionment with the Church's authority would eventually contribute to the Reformation, as people began seeking new paths to faith and understanding. The Black Death didn't just change society, it transformed how people thought about life and death. Artists, writers, and thinkers began to grapple with mortality in new ways. The haunting imagery of the danse macabre, skeletons dancing alongside the living, captured the fragility of life and the inevitability of death. This shift in perspective laid the groundwork for the Renaissance. With more resources concentrated in fewer hands, wealthy patrons supported art, science, and education. The survivors of the plague wanted more than survival, they wanted meaning, beauty, and progress. The Renaissance, one of the most culturally transformative periods in history, emerged from the ashes of the Black Death. As millions of people died, farmland was abandoned, and forests reclaimed the land. This unintended environmental recovery led to cleaner air and more fertile soil. With fewer mouths to feed, agricultural practices began to change, focusing on quality over quantity. The balance between humans and nature temporarily reset, a reminder of how interconnected they are. The disruption of trade networks during the plague had far-reaching consequences. As traditional routes collapsed, European nations sought alternative ways to access goods from Asia and beyond. This shift in focus ultimately fueled the age of exploration, leading to the discovery of new continents and the creation of global empires. The Black Death wasn't just a pandemic, it was a turning point in human history. It shattered old systems, challenged long-held beliefs, and forced humanity to adapt and innovate. The feudal system crumbled, public health measures emerged, art and science flourished, and the seeds of the modern world were planted. While the loss was unimaginable, the survivors rebuilt their world from the ground up. Their resilience and determination to move forward shaped the course of history. The Black Death reminds us of humanity's capacity to endure, to learn, and to create something new from even the darkest moments. Imagine if the Black Death had never happened. Would feudalism have persisted? Would the Renaissance have unfolded? Would modern medicine and science have taken the same paths? The world as we know it owes much to this catastrophic event, a grim yet powerful reminder of how tragedy can reshape the future.